Good morning. Let's open with a word of prayer. Lord, I just want to thank you this morning for who you are. I thank you for the words that we just sang that helped define that for us and puts life back into perspective and helps us to understand who you are and reminds us that we are loved. Lord, I thank you for worship. Thank you for the joy that we find in coming together to worship you. Thank you for your presence here as we do that, as you inhabit the praises of your people. I thank you for your word, Lord, for us. And I ask that you would take that word today and minister to our hearts, give us wisdom and additional knowledge. But Lord, grow us to be more like you. And that's our prayer this morning. So thank you for hearing and answering that. In Jesus' name, amen. So I want to ask you a question. Has anybody here experienced being away from home for an extended period of time and getting homesick? You remember that? Can you explain a little bit what that felt like? Jack, go ahead. Or what was the circumstance?
It meant a lot to me. I was probably 13 and I got quote unquote sent off to camp, which was just totally out of the realm of, they stopped the car at about 40 feet and sent me on, and I was with strangers for 2 weeks, and it was an Episcopal boys camp, and it was not enough. I'd actually been in the camp working on cleaning it, but all of a sudden, an entirely different group of people that I met before and never met before, and navigate. Right. And if I got through the first 3 hours before I went homesick, I went all the way through 2 weeks that way.
Sounds painful.
It was too much of a shock for the pain. The pain came later, about the second week. Did you ask to go? No. I don't remember it being discussed for the summer either. There was a point at which I was told within a couple I can't say honestly as to how much time I had. It wasn't more than a couple of weeks, but they just said, we decided this will be good for you.
Well, it probably was, although it was painful. Sometimes we have to go through those things. Anybody else have an experience that you'd be willing to share with us about what it was like to experience being homesick? Lori.
I had to go to California for a while. I had a relative that I was close to that passed away. He wanted me to, he had planned it where I was to go and oversee his home. And so I was there for 2 weeks. And the culture out there is very different. And I didn't know anyone really. And it was just, I was ready to go home. It was time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just different, and the task, it wasn't a happy one, but the environment was different, and it wasn't home.
Home sounds good sometimes, doesn't it? Anybody else want to share? Jane.
Growing up, every summer we would go for a month to one grandparent's house for a week, another one for a week, and then all the rest. Even though my family was with me, I wanted to get home.
Yeah. What is it? How would you describe the feeling of home? What is it that makes it something that we hurt when we're not there and we want to be there? And what is it that we look forward to?
I think familiar surroundings, things that you put together because that's the way you want it, or if you look away from there, you may be like having to maybe follow certain procedures of another place that you just have to comply to because you're not at home.
Yeah.
And that feeling of comfort is kind of like pulled away. It's your comfort zone when you're at home.
Yeah. Routine.
Yeah.
All those things.
Structure,
yeah. Familiarity. I always was amazed by Pastor Herb Murley. I don't know if you guys remember him, but he used to come here and teach us from North Carolina. And his ministry was one where he went around and did that at other churches. He had an apostolic ministry. And I was always amazed at the grace that he did that with, to be willing to go away, leave home for extended periods of time. And that always impressed me. So, well, the reason that I bring that up is we are talking about home and how comfortable our home is, and yet the Bible tells us that the home that we're talking about right now isn't our home. That we're just strangers here on this planet, that our home is not meant to be where we keep our eyes fixed. And when I think back to some of the Sunday school lessons that we've done in the past, we studied not too long ago about heaven. And the goal, part of the goal of that lesson was to give us an anticipation and an expectation that we have this place to look forward to that is our home. And that even though this world doesn't go the way that we want it to go often, this world is not the end for us. We've got great things to look forward to. And that feeling of finally getting home is the one that we really should be building in our lives. And for me, I think it's easier as I get older because, the aches and pains of life grow more and more. And I'm reminded that I'm not going to escape that. That's part of the process of getting old. And maybe that's part of the process God has given us to grow in us a greater anticipation for what comes next. I don't know, but it works that way for me. And I think that's kind of an attitude that we should all have, is that our sights are set on something beyond this. So don't get so invested in this world that the thought of losing it is more than what we can handle, because we got greater things to look forward to. So, Psalm 23 ends with, "Goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." And it talks about our home. And so that's what Max's focus is going to be today.
For a good 20 years, I wanted a dog, a big dog. But there were always problems. The apartment was too small, the budget was too tight, the girls were too young. But most of all, my wife, Dina Lynn, was unenthusiastic. She figured she had already married one slobbering, shedding beast, so why put up with a second? And so we compromised and got a small dog. I like Salty, but small dogs aren't really dogs. They don't bark, they yelp. They don't eat, they nibble. And they don't lick you, they sniff you. I like Salty, but I wanted a real dog. You know, a man's best friend type of dog, a fat pawed, big eating, slurpy on the face type of dog you could saddle or wrestle or both. I was alone in my passion until our daughter Sarah was born. She loves dogs, so together we were able to sway the household vote. Deanlin gave in, and Sarah and I began the search. We discovered a woman in South Carolina who breeds golden retrievers in a Christian environment. From birth, the dogs are surrounded by inspirational music and prayers. And when the trainer told me that she had read my books, I got on board. A woman with such good taste is bound to be a good breeder, right? So we ordered a pup. We mailed the check, selected the name Molly, and cleared a corner for her dog pillow. The dog hadn't even been born, and she was named, claimed, and given a place in the house. Can't the same be said about you? Long before your first whimper, your master claimed you, named you, and hung a reserved sign on your room. You and Molly have more in common than you might think. You're both being groomed for a trip. We prefer terms like maturation and sanctification to weaning and training, but it's all the same. You're being prepared for your master's house. You don't know the departure date or flight number, but you can bet your puppy chow that you'll be seeing your owner someday. Isn't this the concluding promise of David in Psalm 23:6, when he says, "And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever"? Where will you live forever? In the house of the Lord. If his house is your forever house, what does that make this earthly house? You got it. It's just short-term housing. This is not our home. Philippians 3:20 tells us that our homeland is in heaven. This explains the homesickness we feel. Let me tell you about a time I remember really longing for home. I was spending the summer of my 19th year working in northern Georgia. The folks in that region are very nice, but no one is too nice to a door-to-door salesman. There were times that summer when I was so lonely for home, I felt my bones would melt. One of those occasions came on the side of a country road. The hour was late and I was lost. I'd stopped to pull out a flashlight and a map. There was a farmhouse to my right, and in it a family like Norman Rockwell would have painted. Right through the big plate glass window, I could see the mother spooning out food, the dad telling a story, and the kids laughing hysterically. It was all I could do to keep from ringing the doorbell and asking for a place at the table. I felt so far from home. What I felt that night, some of you have felt ever since your husband died, your child was buried, you learned about the lump in the breast or the spot in your lung. Some of you have felt far from home ever since your home fell apart. The twists and turns of life have a way of reminding us that we aren't home here. This is not our homeland. We aren't fluent in the languages of disease and death. The culture confuses the heart. The noise disrupts our sleep. And we feel far from home. And you know what? That's okay. Homesickness is one burden God doesn't seem to mind if we carry. We, like Molly, are being prepared for another house. And down deep, we know that this world is not our home. We can relate to the remarkable story of Pootsie the parakeet. She had escaped from her owner and came into the keeping of the Humane Society. When no one else claimed her, Sue Gleason did. They hit it off. They talked and hung out together, becoming fast friends. But one day, the little bird did something incredible. It flew over to Mrs. Gleason, put her beak in her ear, and whispered, 1500 South Oneida Street, Green Bay, Wisconsin. Gleason was dumbfounded. She researched and found that the address existed. She went to the house and found a 79-year-old man named John Strubons. Do you have a parakeet? She asked him. I used to, he replied. I miss him terribly. And when he saw his Pootsie, he was thrilled. You know, he even knows his phone number, he said. Now that story isn't as crazy as you might think. You have an eternal address fixed in your mind as well. According to Ecclesiastes 3:11, God has set eternity in the hearts of men. Down deep, you know you are not home yet, so be careful not to act like you are. Don't lower the duffel bag too soon. Would you hang pictures on the wall of a Greyhound bus or set up a bedroom at a roadside rest stop? Why treat this world like a home when it isn't? The greatest calamity is not to feel far from home when you are, but to feel right at home when you are not. Rather than quenching that longing for heaven, why not stir it? God's home is a forever home, and one that's okay to look for on the horizon with hopeful eyes and expectant hearts.
When I was 19, my father died. I saw his dying body just go limp. And I knew at that moment that he was in the presence of God. Something that I thought would be the worst moment of my life just did something to me that has changed the way I've lived. Heaven entered my heart. It became so real to me. I wanted to be there. At that point, I was homesick. It wasn't like this was my home anymore. I realized at that point that heaven is our forever home. In adoption, a term used a lot is forever home, especially with foster children if they go from home to home. Once the adoption process happens, it's called a forever home so that the child knows this is wherever you've landed. I think about that in an eternal perspective. When we know that we have a forever home, then we're not so concerned about things being perfect. If perfection isn't attained, we feel like we failed somehow. It doesn't have to be perfect here. It's never going to be perfect here. There's something more coming. I think about heaven every day. I do. My husband, he knows that I long for eternity. He knows I'm homesick, and he will say to me, okay, you're not going to check out of here, right? Because he knows the desire for me to be in the presence of God in heaven is so strong. And we have 5 kids. We adopted 2 girls from China. Lily was 9 when we adopted her. She had never been nurtured and she had never been loved. She had no understanding of family. She had no understanding of what a home was. No one had ever looked out for her, and she didn't have a place. When she understood that this was her home and she wasn't going anywhere, it just took all the fear out of her. It's kind of funny that, God put it so deep in my heart about I'm homesick for heaven, and I'll be ready anytime he chooses to come get us. At the same time, he's asked me to prepare a home, a good home for Lily, and let her know this is her forever home here, and she has a home coming in heaven as well. The trials and the temptations and the tragedies and the sicknesses, all these things are just a reminder to us that we are not home yet. But if you realize that your forever home is coming and this isn't it, then you will live a life thinking of others, helping others, and showing others the love of Jesus. I started looking at the moment that I, just like my dad, would take my last breath and be standing before God. It wasn't like death was a scary, creepy, weird thing. I saw him take that last breath. It just did something to me that has changed the way I've lived, over 20 years later. There will be a time when we get to heaven and every tear will be wiped away. And at that time, all our hopes and our dreams and all the experiences in our lives that seem to leave us disappointed and wanting, they will all be fulfilled more than we could ever hope for or imagine. We have a forever home, and it's coming.
I have some friends who just adopted 2 small children. The older one is only 3, but he knows the difference between his new home and the foster home from which he came. He tells all visitors, "This is my forever home." Won't it be great when we can say the same? Couldn't we use a forever home? This home we're in won't last forever. Birthdays remind us of that. You know, these days I'm closer to 90 than I am to infancy. And all those things they say about aging are true. I'm patting myself less on the back and more under the chin. I have everything I had 20 years ago, except now it's all lower. The other day I tried to straighten out the wrinkles in my socks and found out I wasn't wearing any. I can relate to Dave Barry, who described aging as dental problems, intestinal malfunctions, muscle deterioration, emotional instability, memory lapses, hearing and vision loss, impotence, seizures, growths, prostate problems, greatly reduced limb function, massive coronary failure, death, and of course, painful hemorrhoidal swelling. Aging is no fun. The way we try to avoid it, you'd think we could. We paint the body, preserve the body, protect the body, and well, we should. Our bodies are gifts from God, and we should be responsible. But we should also be realistic. This body must die so the new body can live. 1 Corinthians 15:50 tells us, flesh and blood cannot have a part in the kingdom of God. Something that will ruin cannot have a part in something that never ruins. Aging is God's idea. It's one of the ways He keeps us headed homeward. We cannot change the process, but we can change our attitude. Here's a thought. What if we looked at the aging body as we look at the growth of a tulip? Do you ever see anyone mourning over the passing of the tulip bulb? The gardeners weep as the bulb begins to weaken? Of course not. We don't purchase tulip girdles or petal wrinkle cream or consult plastic leaf surgeons. We don't mourn the passing of the bulb. We celebrate it. Tulip lovers rejoice the minute the bulb weakens. They say, "Watch that one, it's about to blossom." Could it be that heaven does the same? The angels point to our bodies. The more frail we become, the more excited they become. They say, "Watch that lady in the hospital. She's about to blossom." Keep an eye on the fellow with the bad heart. He'll be coming home soon. In his letter to the Romans, Paul the Apostle says, we are waiting for God to finish making us His own children, which means our bodies will be made free. Are our bodies now free? No. In the Message translation of Philippians 3:21, Paul describes them as our earthy bodies. Other translations call them our lowly body, or the body of our humble state, or these weak mortal bodies. You could add your own adjective, couldn't you? Which word describes your body? Cancerous, arthritic, deformed, crippled, addicted, ever expanding? The word may be different, but the message is the same. These bodies are weak. They began decaying the minute we began breathing. And according to God, that's part of the plan. Every wrinkle takes us one step closer to the last step when Jesus will change our simple bodies into forever bodies. No pain, no depression, no sickness, and no end. This is not our forever house. It will serve for the time being, but there is nothing like the moment we enter His door. Remember my story about our first real dog, Molly? Well, she knows. After a month in our house, she ran away. I came home one night to find the place unusually quiet. Molly was gone. She had slipped out unnoticed. The search began immediately, and within an hour, we knew she was far, far from home. Now, if you don't like pets, what I'm about to say is going to sound strange. But if you do like pets, you'll understand. You'll understand why we walked up and down the street calling her name. You'll understand why I drove around the neighborhood until 10:30 p.m. You'll understand why I put up a poster in the convenience store and convened the family for a prayer. I really did. And why I sent emails to the staff asking for prayers and to her breeder asking for advice. If you really love your pet, you'd understand why we were ready to toss the confetti and party when she showed up. Here's what happened. The next morning, my wife, Deanlin, was on her way home from taking the girls to school when she saw the trash truck. She asked the workers to keep an eye out for Molly and then hurried home to host a mom's prayer group. Soon after the ladies arrived, the trash truck pulled into our driveway. A worker opened the door and out bounded our dog. She had been found. When Deanlin called to tell me the news, I could barely hear her voice. It was Mardi Gras in the kitchen. The ladies were celebrating the return of Molly. That's something you and I have in common with Molly, a party at our homecoming. By that moment, only one bag will remain. Not guilt, it was dropped at Calvary. Not the fear of death, it was left at the grave. The only lingering luggage will be this God-given longing for home. And when you see him, you'll set it down. Just as a returning soldier drops his duffel when he sees his wife, you'll drop your longing when you see your father. And those who love you will shout, and those who know you will applaud. But all the noise will cease when he cups your chin and says, "Welcome home." And with scarred hand, he'll wipe away every tear from your eye. And you, yes, you, will dwell in the house of your Lord forever.
Are you tired? Worn out? Are you burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly.
We may not start life with a lot of baggage, but the older we get, the more we seem to pick up along the way. Of course, not everyone carries such a heavy load. In the Bible, we see that some of these light travelers were the people Jesus enjoyed the most. They weren't encumbered by political pursuits or theological debates or high taxes. For them, life was simpler. Trust came easy. In fact, Jesus even said, "The kingdom of heaven belongs to them. And unless we become like them, we will not enter the kingdom." if you want to understand how to travel light, there's a lot you can learn from children. Let's hear what they have to say.
Heaven is like happiness. Heaven is a place where Jesus lives. It has like these fun games there that everyone can play. I think there's clouds in heaven. I imagined it having golden roads. Everything's made out of gold, golden buildings, and a big golden gate. All of it really, really bright. Maybe fun stuff like maybe sometimes video games.
There's always music on, and everybody's dancing.
There's a bunch of candy stores. My brother thinks all he will do in heaven is wrestle.
There's kids running everywhere.
There's a bunch of angels.
Nothing bad will happen. No injuries.
The only thing I think you need in heaven is God. When you're with God, there's no need for anything else.
I think Dorothy said it best. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. Don't you just love coming home after a long trip? Someday we'll all face that moment. Can you envision it? Heaven. We're about to enter His presence. We don't deserve it. We haven't earned it. Soon we will walk with Him and talk with Him and worship as He leads. Soon God, the author of life and composer of hope, will speak our name. A name so mysterious and full of promise that only He knows it. It is our name, a new name, a name totally our own, to be ours alone for all the days we spend in heaven, our home. Now that's a place worth longing for. That nagging, weighty baggage of feeling homesick is merely God's way of reminding us that there's a celebration awaiting us upon our arrival. With so much to look forward to, we can leave the dread of feeling homesick behind. It's a burden we were never meant to carry. And while we're at it, we might as well leave the other bags as well. Anxiety, worry, grief, every burden we thought we could carry on our own. Let's start traveling light.
The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. All right, so Max talked about baggage that we don't want to lay down, and this being one of them, the baggage of being homesick. We're encouraged to look forward to what God has in store for us. One of the things he said was, would you put a picture on the wall of a bus or make a bedroom at a rest stop? Yeah, that was a good analogy. And yet some of you guys might remember Ron Van Black, who used to go to church here. He did just that.